2024 was the best year of my life. I transitioned out of my full-time job and turned my side hustle into a full-time business. And making that transition was pretty cool. I now have more flexibility, more freedom, and a little bit more money. And whilst it certainly does have its downsides on occasions, like working more hours, and sometimes it can be a little bit more stressful, I wouldn't have been able to experience any of the benefits if I didn't take a chance on myself and get started. So today I wanted to share with you guys how you can start a profitable side hustle. And I'll also share some of the principles that I've followed up until this point, which made 2024 the most financially successful year I've ever had. But let me be straight with you guys, I'm just a normal guy that simply followed his passion. I started my working life working at McDonald's, to a 7-year career then in banking, and now a full-time owner of 2 different businesses. So if I can do it, then there's no reason why anybody watching this video can't, with a little bit of hard work and dedication. So with that said, let's begin. A piece of research published back in late 2024 of 1,000 British people showed that 50.3% of them had some kind of side hustle. Now, whilst that is a fairly small sample size of people, it certainly goes to show that there's definitely an appetite amongst the British population to earn a little bit more money and perhaps have multiple different streams of income, which I personally think is great, but I also fear that there's probably quite a lot of people just sat on the sidelines, if you like, because they're not exactly too sure where to start. So here is my 6-step framework, which is going to take you from idea right the way through to execution. Make sure you grab a pen or paper, or I'll leave a link down in the description to a spreadsheet which you can make a copy of in order to help you work through this process. So now let's start off with step 1. Starting a side hustle about something that you're genuinely interested in, for me, is probably one of the most important things before you even consider getting started. If you're not interested or passionate about that side hustle, it will quickly fizzle out when that kind of intrinsic motivation is no longer there, especially if it doesn't take off right away. For me, I have a deep passion around personal finance, but to be honest, I'm still quite baffled that it's not taught in mainstream education. And since I've always been kind of like good with money from a very young age, thought I'd start making videos on this YouTube channel right the way back in 2020 from all of the education that I've gained throughout my life and the research that I've done around the topic too. But the reality is I did this more out of passion than anything else, because I didn't make any money from this for at least the first 6 months. In actual fact, I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours without making a single penny, right the way up until July 1st, 2020, where I made my first £6.49. A couple of weeks later, I made over £30 in a single day, and I was absolutely overjoyed and thought, well, I might be able to make a success out of this thing that I'm doing. But the most important lesson here is that money was the byproduct. It certainly wasn't the motivation, because if I was in it for the money, then I probably would have quit long before that 6-month mark, before I ever got monetized. And that would be understandable, because after all, none of us can just work for nothing. However, just make sure that money isn't your sole purpose, because after all, the money certainly might not come straight away. So start to think about your list of personal interests are. That can be anything from finance to DIY to cars, football, fitness, cleaning, shopping. It simply doesn't matter, because I'm going to show you how you can monetize all of those things next. Before we begin, remember what I said here, interest first, money second. But the most fulfilling way to make that money is to turn those interests into cash. It's where you're going to need to spend a little bit more time around thinking about the business model that you're likely going to adopt. But fundamentally, in order to make money in today's modern society, there are only really 3 main ways. The first 2 are the ones that have stood the test of time, which is to sell either a product or a service. And the third one, perhaps a little bit newer and a little bit more niche, but that's content creation. Now, content creation is a funny one because it's not really a product or a service. If anything, it's a little bit more of a marketing tool, if you like, that brands can look to leverage in order to help them sell their own products and services. I stumbled across a CNBC article on a lady called Ana Maria Ortiz. You probably haven't heard of her before, and it just kind of goes to show that you don't need to be some kind of social media superstar in order to make a living from a side hustle. Because Anna decided to start a cleaning business as a side hustle just 12 months ago, and now she makes a whopping $10,000 a month, which is about £7,500. This service in itself is certainly nothing groundbreaking. In actual fact, cleaning services have been available, according to Google AI, right the way back to the Victorian era, where wealthy households needed dedicated staff for cleaning and maintenance activities. So this isn't certainly a case of needing to reinvent the wheel in order to start a side hustle. But Anna did do something a little bit different in order to stand out from the crowd, and that was through how she named her business, which is called Cool Aunt Cleaning. She shared that a cool aunt is someone who looks out for their nieces, nephews, and friends, and if they find weed under your bed, they're not going to tell your mum or something. It's something that's resonated with her target market of young professionals, and it's allowed her to quickly grow her brand within quite a small period of time. But let's say cleaning isn't your area of interest, and instead perhaps you like football instead. Well, I just went onto ChatGPT and wrote the following. I have a passion for football and I'd like to make a side hustle out of it. What options do I have to either sell a product or service, or even make content around which could be monetized, that I could do in my spare time as I work a 9 to 5 job already? And ChatGPT gave me 17 different business ideas that I could pursue. So be sure to start there if you're kind of struggling to generate ideas. In order for any business to be a success, there needs to be a demand for that product, service, or content that you're looking to produce. And demand can be generated in multiple different ways, and I'll put up a list of them here. Think of a product that you've recently purchased. The chances are one of those characteristics on screen will likely be one of the driving forces behind why you went on to make that purchasing decision. And as a business owner, you need to put yourself in the customer's shoes and think, why would a customer want to purchase the product or service or consume the content that I'm offering to them? Now, to dive a little bit deeper into one of those demand characteristics, let's talk about Ben Francis, who is the owner of Gymshark. Now, he started his company from his university dorm room, and fun fact, we actually went to the same university as each other. But the company itself was actually founded because Ben, whilst he enjoyed going to the gym, he didn't really have any kind of gym attire that he liked to wear, and because of that, he decided to make his own. That side hustle, which he started out back in 2012, eventually became a full-time business and was valued at £1 billion back in 2020. So some 4 or 5 years later, it's probably worth a little bit more than that now. So now you've discovered your area of interest and that you can be paid for it, and established that the world needs that product, service, or content, the next thing is super important because it makes side hustling accessible for everybody. Okay, so there's probably a misconception out there that in order to start a side hustle or to start a business, you need lots and lots of startup capital in order to get that thing off the ground. But let me be honest, that's absolute rubbish. For me personally, to start my business, I grabbed my iPhone. I think I probably paid about £20 for a tripod on Amazon, maybe another 20 or 30 quid for a whiteboard, and that was really about it. Everything else I already owned, like my laptop, and I downloaded some free editing software, and kind of away I went. And actually, when you're starting out in business, contrary to what you may believe, actually spending as little money as possible is probably a sensible thing to do. Because the last thing you'd want to do is chuck tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds into some new idea that you've got without any kind of like proof of concept that it's gonna be successful. There was this guy in Dragon's Den who asked for £1 million of investor money for a startup company that essentially just ran you a bath automatically. I actually found a LinkedIn post from the inventor where he reacts to the clip that went out from the BBC on the Dragon's Den show, which he didn't really take too kindly to. However, fundamentally, he even writes himself that he blew through £500,000 back in 2007 already, before he pitched this idea to the Dragons. Now, for me, that's not really a place that I would want to be in, and I think it's a really high-risk approach to looking to start out a side hustle or just any business whatsoever. Instead, start out with like a basic proof of concept. Treat it almost like an experiment of sorts. It'll allow you to establish what your product, service, or even content is, and then find out whether there's any demand for it out in the market. Then only once you start to see results can you then start to think about perhaps reinvesting back into that business. Now, in my case, it was buying a better camera lens, even a more professional and high quality microphone, along with even better lighting equipment, which I've got scattered around here, in order to turn this spare bedroom into a little bit more of a professional setup. But fundamentally, each business has different levels of startup requirements, so be sure to rank that kind of level of affordability from 1 through to 10, with 10 being a cheap startup versus 1 being an expensive one. But it is why I think content creation, specifically in the style that I do it, where my expenses are absolutely minimal, is such a powerful business model to adopt. I can keep my business lean, and as a result, my financial risk and exposure is lower, and I can still make a decent profit too. And that's because of what we're going to discuss in the next step. Having something that's scalable is very much down to personal preference and what your appetite is to turn what could be just a small side hustle, earning a few extra quid, into a full-time business that may generate multiple six figures a year. But based on the research that I also mentioned at the start of the video, roughly 47% of people that were surveyed would like to take their side hustle into a full-time business. And if you are one of those people that would like to do that, then it's absolutely critical that that business is sufficiently scalable. And when I say scalable, I certainly mean scalable beyond that of your 9 to 5 capability. And more specifically, when you're working a 9 to 5, you're essentially selling your time for money. Whereas when you have a side hustle or even indeed a business, you ideally want to be able to package up that time and then sell it for an elevated price. One of the best examples I've seen of this kind of transition is from a content creator called Ali Abdaal. He started his career out as a doctor, making like £40,000 a year, I think he once said in a video. And then whilst going on to reach millions of people via social media, he then launched a paid community or a course, and then rapidly scaled his business into multi-seven figures. Essentially all he did was he packaged up his time, his expertise, and his intellectual property, and then he sold that thing again and again and again. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the most advanced levels of business scalability, where you can essentially do something once and then be paid for it for many years into the future. But for me personally, at a little bit more of a basic level of scalability, once I started to earn a little bit of money from my side hustle, there were two scalability targets that I had in mind. The first one was to scale to the equivalent of my 9 to 5 income, and the second was to scale to the income which was the equivalent to a promotion in my old job. And the reason why I thought like this is because I didn't just want to replace my secure 9 to 5 income with an income that was just the same, but with all of that added financial pressure and admittedly risk. There obviously had to be some kind of additional financial reward there for taking that risk and making the transition. Now that would have been the equivalent of a promotion for me, which was about an additional £15,000 to £20,000 in income. So be sure to set some kind of scalability targets for yourself too, and then be sure to rank them on that spreadsheet as well. This final step is perhaps a little bit subjective, but it's all around your probability of success, and I suggest you rank it between 1 and 10, with 1 being a low probability of success and 10 being a high probability on what your perceived chances of success are. And the reason why I've put this here is to kind of perhaps prevent that kind of pipe dream style of thinking. Because to start the next Tesla, whilst I'm sure it would be fun and exciting, it's going to be far more challenging than setting up a business where you're selling personalized dog socks. And that's certainly not to discourage anybody that has the aspirations to run a company of that size, scale, and impact, but it just doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start there. If I think about this YouTube channel, will I still be making videos in perhaps 5, 10, or 20 years from now? Or will this YouTube channel be a stepping stone onto something else? The answer is I honestly don't know. I may have found another passion that I want to look to pursue, or I could still be sat behind this camera 10 or 20 years from now, hoping that a few of you guys are still watching. So you don't necessarily need to think that your first business is going to be your last. You may have ups and downs along the way, different successes and failures, and there's certainly no wrong way to go about it. But perhaps starting with something that may be perceived to be a little bit easier might just give you that confidence to go on and do more things in the future. But having said that, all side hustles inevitably are going to have their own difficulties and challenges that you're going to have to overcome, especially if you want to have an impact and actually make a decent amount of money. Like if I think about YouTube, for example, if you have over 1,000 subscribers on the platform, according to this article, you're in the top 8.86% of creators. And actually, after you've achieved that, can you only be monetized on the platform? But to get over 100,000 subscribers, which I'm yet to achieve, you'll need to be in the top 0.6% of creators. So YouTube is hard too, and the probability of success is fairly low. But I do certainly believe if you work hard and kind of continue to learn as you go, then you'll overcome some of those odds that may seem like they're a little bit against you. Now, there are a few other principles too, which I've left in the spreadsheet for you to explore and assess. And I guess the higher the score, the more idealistic, I guess you could say, that side hustle might be for you. But be sure to assess it based on your own principles as well, and what fits best for you in your life and your own personal circumstances. So this is a 6-step framework in order to kind of get prepared in launching a side hustle. And then the final step in the process, of course, is execution. Whether that's brainstorming a brand name, claiming social media handles, building a website, a newsletter, creating content, or even perhaps thinking about a product structure. Make it your New Year's resolution to take one small action every single day in order to get that thing off the ground. And in 365 days from now, I'm pretty sure that you'll feel like you can pat yourself on the back. But before you go, I recently made a video on the system that I use to personally make over £10,000 a month from my business. So if you are interested, be sure to check out that video next. Be sure to subscribe to the channel on your way out. That being said, I'll see you over in the next one.